Welcome back to the Donkey Vote podcast with Francis.
Tobias.
And George. These interviews will be focusing on the past careers of politicians before they entered parliament.
With a strong intention to our audience that anything is achievable no matter what you studied in university or college.
If you like this sort of content, please make sure you like, subscribe, comment, and share with your friends. Also, we are on YouTube and Spotify, so make sure you follow us on those platforms.
Make sure to follow us on Instagram as well to keep updated with the latest episodes and reels that we release.
Enjoy
the
the
interview.
And today we are joined by Andrew De Blocq of the Democratic Alliance representing Gauteng in central South Africa. So, Andrew, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm quite excited.
Yes, hopefully I pronounced your last name correctly and your home province correctly. So it's a bit of
Yeah,
a
my
mouthful, Gauteng.
yes, yeah, you've got to give it a bit of a roll. So it's you got to give it a sort of guttural so it's a Gauteng.
Okay,
But we'll
okay.
let you off the hook for that one. It takes a little bit of practice to get right.
It does, it does, it does. But yes, Andrew, so just for our audience out there who may not know maybe an entire lot about you and about your home province of Gauteng, sorry there. Could you give us a little brief description just before we get into the questions?
Sure. So description of myself as well as the province, or just
Yes,
the
yes, just a
province.
little brief one just
Okay.
before we get. I mean, the questions do relate to it, but yeah, just so the audience knows a little bit more about you.
Sure, no problem. So starting with Gauteng, so we are the economic hub of the country. We're home to two major metropolitan areas in Johannesburg and Pretoria, or Tshwane, it's also known as. Johannesburg is the economic heart of South Africa. Most of our big businesses are based here, and it's really an economic province. So it's our smallest province by a long way, but it certainly punches above its weight in terms of economic contribution. There isn't much in the way of agriculture or environment. There certainly are environmental issues like pollution in rivers and air pollution and that, but in terms of natural environments, which South Africa is so well known for, those are mostly found outside of Gauteng, with a few exceptions to that, of course. It's sort of central to the country, sort of northeast of center, and is just a major hub for travel, for conferences, for business, all those economic drivers. So that is Gauteng in a nutshell. I am not a run-of-the-mill politician. I'm very new to this, actually. My election in June of this year to Parliament is my first ever political position. So I've, in some ways, sort of jumped through a few hoops that others usually traverse through. I'll talk a little bit about how I managed to do that and why I did that and my journey. But I'm actually a trained scientist. I'm a biologist. I've been working in the NGO, the non-governmental organization space in conservation and tourism for the last nearly 7 years after finishing my master's degree in Cape Town. I'm from Cape Town originally, although I have spent the last nearly 5 years in Johannesburg in Gauteng as my base. So a little bit of a different background to, I imagine, most of your guests on this show.
Exactly. And I was doing some research about you when I was correlating the questions. And it was quite interesting to see that, you spend a lot of time in biology, especially studying birds specifically, which I'm guessing you might be the only one, maybe, I'm guessing in the whole of South Africa, maybe in the entire world, being a politician, that's come from such a diverse background. And it's really, really important that, in a sense, politicians come from diverse backgrounds because you can't just have consistently always lawyers, trade unionists, these sort of things. You got to have diversity because you got to represent people that you are elected to represent at the end of the day.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think there is definitely value to career politicians, and they serve an incredibly useful purpose, and they have a lot of institutional knowledge, theoretical and academic knowledge that they bring to it, which is a side of things that I'm having to learn now, coming from outside of politics and being thrust into the inner sanctum of Parliament, which has all of its own nuances and rules and
Mm.
things that you have to navigate, which has been an interesting journey in the last 4 or 5 months since I took office. But that being said, I agree with you. I think having specialists able to contribute at the highest level of government is incredibly useful.
Mm.
So, for example, we have a doctor who sits on the health portfolio for the Democratic Alliance. We have myself who's sitting on the environmental portfolio as someone with academic and work experience in the field. And in my portfolio, it's been particularly useful, I think, for the Democratic Alliance because we have a minister in my portfolio. So for the first time ever, we are actually in national government. We've held several local and provincial government leadership roles in the past and continue to, especially in the Western Cape, where our sort of supporter base first grew from and where we really have a stronghold for the party. And now we are, for the first time, in a government of national unity with, I think it's 9 other parties, and the ministries are split between those different parties. And this happens to be one where the DA has a minister sitting. So it's been very important, I think, and very useful to have someone like myself to work with the minister who comes from a finance background. And I can give some expert insights that perhaps he wouldn't have had that kind of support in the past with a more generalist politician. So I think there are roles for both, but certainly I'm very excited to be able to serve in a committee and a portfolio that really aligns with my personal interests and hobbies and passions. So yeah, it's a wonderful opportunity to contribute to something I really care about.
Mm. And I'm guessing that your minister there that you're referring to is the Honourable Dion Dr. Dion George, who is a Minister for Environment and Forestry and Fisheries, I'm guessing. So yeah, and I think is he also from the same is he also from Gauteng originally, or I think he might be representing Western Cape.
So Dion is from Gauteng originally. He actually was the branch chairperson for the constituency that I live in, which is Sandton. It's close to the CBD of Johannesburg, and he came up through the ranks of constituency and branch representation, and then came through different government positions into his role as an MP. He then actually took a break from Parliament, went to the USA and worked on Wall Street. Like I said, he's a finance man. And then he moved back to South Africa, but moved to Cape Town and then was re-elected to Parliament from the Western Cape. So he is a Joburg boy at heart, and I know he'll love me saying that. But he does represent the Western Cape on our ballot sheets now.
See, I see, and I guess as well, seeing as he's coming from a finance background, it's pretty crucial for you as well to, be able to support him in his capacity. Seeing as he may not have an entire lot of experience in this role, so really, I guess surrounding yourselves with people, you can trust and have experience, in certain facets and certain roles prior to Parliament is really, really crucial as a minister who, as in a ministerial position where, for example, you may not have an entire lot of experience and an entire lot of know-how straight away.
Yeah, of course. I think his background in finance is incredibly useful in this specific portfolio because there has been a lot of financial mismanagement. And also, we have a huge mandate, as you mentioned, forestry, fisheries, and environment, which includes everything from nature conservation to waste management,
Mhm.
and climate change and air quality, even. So he has an incredibly broad portfolio, but with a budget that has been cut for the last few rounds in a row. So it's very difficult to manage a department when there's potential leaks in your expenditure, but you have an increasingly large workload and mandate. So it's important that he's in that position to sort of tie up all those loose ends and make sure that the department is running efficiently. But on the other hand, you do need the support of people who can advise you on not only the political navigations that you have to make, but also the content that you're having to deal with and decisions you're having to make on environmental appeals, for example. But he has surrounded himself with a really good team of people.
Mhm.
I can support from the party side, but in his own department, he has some wonderful advisors and researchers who's serving him. And he is he's scientifically minded, so he will always make sure to come back to the facts, make decisions based on the best available science. So I really appreciate that about him. Yeah, he's a very, very smart man, and we're lucky to have him in this position. And there's a tenet that our leader, John Steenhuisen, who's also the Minister of Agriculture, but the party leader as well, he always says, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. So you must always surround yourself with the best possible people to make sure you get the best outcomes.
Exactly. Exactly, 100% agree with that, Andrew. So, moving on then to our questions for you, Andrew. How was, and this is our first question always for the podcast, but how was your high school and university life? Seeing as it wasn't probably too long ago compared to other politicians. And do you have any memorable moments you'd like to share on the podcast?
Yeah, I loved high school. I'm sure that's not the answer you always get, but I really enjoyed it. I got involved in absolutely everything at high school. I was quite an academic kid, but also loved the cultural side of things. I'm a musician. I
Oh,
actually play the
wow.
bagpipes, which is a
Cool.
bit of a different, a bit of a different
And I
party
guess that's
trick.
relating to that relates a little bit to our next question, in a sense.
Yeah, we'll get there. And yeah, I loved the sports field. I was a rugby player and a rower actually.
Oh,
Rowing is probably my best sport at school. I have a couple of national medals. Never managed a gold, but got two silvers and a bronze at the rowing championships over my rowing career. In terms of memorable instances, I think probably. Well, one of the extracurricular activities I got involved in heavily and has certainly helped me get into politics, being public speaking so often is debating.
mm,
So I think it's a crucial way to not only mold the way you think, but also be able to speak on your feet and think quickly. And at my school, we had a Model United Nations um, competition that we used to attend in Ireland. So we used to go over from South Africa to Ireland with a delegation or a team every year or every second year. And I was lucky enough to be on that team, and we were assigned Indonesia. So we were
oh,
South Africans in Ireland representing Indonesia, which was really interesting. And yeah, I had some really fun times over there, met some awesome people who I've stayed in touch with to this day. What is that now? About 16, 17 years later. It's giving away my
yes.
age. Um, but yeah, I had some wonderful times at school, really enjoyed it, and just took every opportunity that came my way. And I was lucky to go to a very good school in South Africa, a boarding school in the Eastern Cape, which is a very traditional school. And yeah, I absolutely love being a boarder.
Um, and I guess, did you ever think about maybe going down the rowing path, as a professional career, seeing as you were quite as you described it, quite an accomplished rower, for South Africa and, representing and doing quite well in age competitions in the South African national championships.
Yeah, I never quite cracked the South African squad. I was in the sort of provincial squad, if you can call it that. And I was provincial sculls champion one year. I think it was under 16 or something like that. But no, I was never quite good enough to make this an actual career. And I think sports, people say that politics is a fickle career. I think sports is even more so. So
Mm, I
I
mean,
I wasn't.
yeah.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, there's over 400 and there's over 400 MPs in South Africa, and I'm guessing it's going to probably be about there's probably around 100 people who made the Olympic team. So it is quite a fickle sport, as you was, and that doesn't include provincial government and local government. So compared to politics, sport can be quite challenging to succeed and do very very well.
Yeah, I think sport is important from a life balance point of view. I think keeping
Hmm.
healthy is extremely important, and sport at schools is important in sort of instilling
Exactly.
that practice and that discipline. And that was very good for me, although I don't have access to rowing facilities anymore, but I still enjoy,
Mm.
running and a bit of gym and a bit of cycling, and that definitely has carried over from my school days.
It's always important to try and keep active, and especially after high school and university. When you're in your working career, it can be quite difficult, especially with work-life balance, to try and get time to go outside, enjoy the nature. Maybe enjoy looking at some birds, like yourself, and study some birds like yourself, like you did before, Andrew. But yeah, I guess in a sense, really staying active, whether that be running, gym, as you said, what you do is really, really important, especially as an MP, which can be quite a difficult and challenging job. Dealing with constituents and dealing with a lot of stuff that happens in Parliament that a lot of, I guess, people who aren't involved in politics may not completely understand, sadly.
Yeah, 100%. That work-life balance can be a real challenge.
Mhm.
And exercise is a great way to clear your head and just also keep yourself humble.
Exactly,
Because
exactly.
yeah, you can really challenge yourself in different ways through that. And I loved what you said about going out and enjoying nature. That is my real core passion. I love birds are my absolute first love, but just being outside, being able to get some fresh air, enjoying, some greenery, the change of the seasons. And in South Africa, we're blessed with such incredible wildlife. I love to go out to the game reserves and take myself on a bit of a safari and have some downtime. So that is incredibly important to me.
See, I see, Andrew. But yes, moving on then to our next question. You did touch on your fact that you play the bagpipes. So I'm guessing this relates to this question in a sense. So after high school, you went on a gap year in Scotland, which is quite, I guess, not many, I guess, South Africans would go take a gap year in Scotland. But can you talk to us a bit about your time in Scotland? And do you think a lot of young people should take a gap year if they don't necessarily know exactly what they want to do after high school?
Yeah, I finished high school not really knowing what I wanted to do. I said to someone the other day, I still don't quite know what I want to do when I grow up, but I think I might have found it.
Late now.
Yeah, exactly. So I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I'd applied to three different universities, one for genetics, one for biodiversity and conservation, and the third for journalism. So I'd left my options fairly wide open. Got into all three and still didn't quite know what I wanted to do. So I ended up taking a gap year as a way of just giving myself some time to figure that out and to go out and enjoy myself. So I went out to Scotland because I played the bagpipes. So I learned those at school and again was participating at national championship level in solo piping and really enjoyed it. And a
Do
lot
you
of,
do you still play, Andrew?
sorry?
Sorry, do you still play the
I
bagpipes
do.
even now?
I
Ah,
do. I until I moved to Johannesburg about a few years ago, I had a band in Cape Town called the Cape Town Highlanders that I used to play for. Sadly, since I moved and with COVID, I haven't been able to get back into it, but I still play for family events, weddings, birthdays, New Year's, those kinds of things. I'll get them out and the muscle memory takes over. But yeah, I don't play for a band or competitively anymore, sadly. Um, but a lot of my friends at the end of school were thinking about gap years, but most were going to England. And I thought perhaps with the bagpipes behind me, Scotland might be a good place to explore. So I made some applications and got myself into Loreto School, which is in the east of Edinburgh. Absolutely loved it. It was a life-changing year, some incredible experiences, and I I I don't know if you've seen the movie Forrest Gump, but I
yes.
seem to find myself in the right place at the right time, very, very often. We'll talk about how that was sort of the case with me getting into Parliament and the stars that aligned for that a little bit later. But the pipe band that I joined over there ended up getting some pretty awesome gigs. We went down to Lord's Cricket Ground and played at a test match between England and Bangladesh. The Pope visited Edinburgh, and we were part of a 100 piper brigade that welcomed him down the main street in Edinburgh from the castle. And then the cherry on the cake was Paul McCartney, one of the Beatles, was touring around the world and had a date in Glasgow. And we ended
Mm.
up being the band on stage that accompanied him for a very famous song called Mull of Kintyre. So yeah, definitely one of the coolest things I'll ever do in my life, playing for 50,000 just absolutely ecstatic Scottish people alongside a legend of the music industry. Yeah, so my gap year was pretty memorable, you could say.
Yes, you could squeeze all
Um,
of those events into one year is quite impressive as well.
yeah,
That'd be awesome for like just the average person's life in general, just to go to Lord's, visit Paul McCartney, play for Paul McCartney, and play for the Pope. But you squeeze that all in 12 months. That's quite an incredible year as well, Andrew. Probably one of the I guess one of your highlights in your whole life.
oh yeah, it will be forever. Yeah, if I think back to it, I can sort of put myself back on that stage. It was just such a surreal, engrossing experience. But further to that, just being in that different environment, having to be a bit more independent, do my own washing, look after my own, food and being in charge of my own schedule and earning a salary and all these things. But in a fairly controlled environment was a really great experience for me. So, back to your question, I think if you have an opportunity to do a gap year and you're possibly in the same situation I was, it is an option. And if you do take that option, my advice is just make the most of your opportunities. I think that
Exactly.
applies to everything, people at school, people on gap years, university, in your careers. Half of the battle is just being able to put your hand up for things and speaking to the right people. So take the opportunities that come your way.
Exactly. 100% agree with you there, because at the end of the day, that opportunity might only arise once, and if you don't take it, you may not get something similar or even as good as that, or even better, down the
Exactly.
line. So taking every single opportunity, as you did, Andrew, going to Scotland and opening your eyes up to a different sort of society from South Africa, would have been really, really good. And experiencing those things that you experience and what that you've shared with us today, it really, I guess, should inspire a lot of young people who may not know entirely what they want to do after high school, of course, to go out there and venture out and try new things, because you never know how and what could happen and where you could end up.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
So then moving on to our next question then for you, Andrew. So additionally, you are a qualified ornithologist. So working as a freelance professional bird guide from 2015 to 2017, and then joining BirdLife South Africa in 2018, working as a coastal seabird conservation manager, and then you became the AV tourism project manager in 2020. Can you talk to us a bit about your career as an ornithologist? And seeing as it's not a very common career for a politician, um, yeah, I'm guessing you probably, as I said before, you're probably the only politician maybe in the whole entire world that's coming from that ornithologist sort of background.
Yeah, I'm going to correct you quickly. Sorry to correct your pronunciation twice on one episode, but it's ornithologist.
All thing, so
Ornithologist. It's a tough one.
ornithologist. Okay. Yes,
There we go. Nailed it.
ornithologist.
Nailed it.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, it is a bit of a funny background. Like I said, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do after school. I actually came back from my gap year and just made the most convenient choice. My parents were still living in Cape Town, so I just went to the University of Cape Town. Um, and yeah, I worked my way up through the ranks there. I was more interested, to be honest, in ecosystem-wide sort of applications and also charismatic predators. So I worked on spotted hyenas for my honors degree, and wanted to carry on doing my masters on leopards and lions. And I had a project lined up through University of Oxford in the UK, but wasn't able to get the scholarships to go. And it was really at that point that my career diverted towards birds because I found a project with a very prominent ornithologist here in South Africa, Peter Ryan, who yeah took me on this new journey, and I really fell in love with birds at that point. So yeah, since then, within 18 months of starting a bird list, I was guiding clients professionally, all around the province and the country. Yeah, had some awesome experiences with that. Met some great people from all around the world, which was incredible, and earned a little bit of money on the side, which is always useful as a student. And yeah, I really enjoyed that side of things. And when I finished my master's, I joined BirdLife South Africa, which is one of the country's top conservation NGOs, and the only one that's purely dedicated to South Africa's birds. It's also part of a large international family of organizations. There is a partner organization in Australia as well,
Wow.
but also over 100 different organizations around the world are part of the BirdLife family, so it's called. So yeah, it was an incredible place to work. Started off in a research role, as you mentioned, on coastal seabirds. So I was working on African penguins. Not everyone realizes we have penguins in South Africa, but we
I
have.
forgot where they're in the Western Cape, on the very south coast of I forgot the point, but I've heard about these penguins. I think they're in Simontown, aren't they?
Yes, yeah. Simonstown is the famous colony. It's called Boulders
Yes.
Beach.
Boulders Beach,
Boulders
yes,
Beach,
yes.
that's it. So yes, that's the most famous because it's easy to see. Obviously being on the mainland, most of the penguin colonies are actually on offshore islands where people don't usually get to. So it's really
Mm,
cool that we have that, and it's also a huge tourist attraction, of course, in Cape Town. But they're unfortunately highly endangered penguins. There was African penguins at least, but many penguins worldwide are actually endangered. There was a study that came out this year that said that without urgent intervention, we may lose African penguins as a species in the wild by 2035.
mm,
So yeah, you can understand the dire nature of that situation. So I was researching these penguins, working out where during their most sensitive life stages, before and after breeding, where they were going fishing, what were the most important areas, using little GPS tags that I put on the penguins' backs, and used that data to then go to government to
mm,
advocate for penguin conservation. And that was my first exposure really to how governments worked. So I sat in as an observer on these fisheries management groups, which now, as a parliamentarian, I have oversight of, which is, quite a turnaround. But that was my first exposure to politics and how governments worked. And then I moved up to Johannesburg after 2.5 years of working on penguins to take over my new role, which I had for a few more years, which was the tourism and conservation project. So we had a really successful program training people from disadvantaged communities to be professional tour guides in South Africa and take people around to look at birds. It's a real thriving economy here in South Africa. And I oversaw that as well as a bunch of other things. And again, was exposed to government through funding. We had funding from the Western Cape government, from a couple of parastatal companies like Eskom, our power provider, who put some money down. So again, got a bit more affair with how government worked and how sometimes it didn't work as well.
mm,
Yeah,
mm. And that's quite good as well, getting that sort of experience, prior to Parliament. And of course, you're talking about tourism, especially with nature and wildlife in South Africa. It is quite, it's quite massive for the economy, probably one of the second
huge.
or third biggest exports in the entire economy. As you said, not many people would know about the penguins and that sort of thing in the Western Cape, but people talk about safaris, especially in the northern provinces, and even other the more northern African countries, above South Africa, like Botswana and Namibia, have really big safari scenes. So it is a really, really important part of the economy of South Africa, and it's quite important, as you were saying, to continue conservation, because as you were seeing with the penguins, they're an endangered species, and when they're gone, and they can't really come back. So it's important that that sort of work is being put forward now to try and preserve them, and not only keep it as a tourist hotspot, something for overseas travelers to see, but also to keep the cultural and linguistic aspect within the country, which is so important. It's so important, to have those natural animals which are prevalent within South Africa to stay there into the future.
Absolutely. It's one of the focus points for the new minister is our biodiversity economy.
Mm,
So South Africa has incredible biological assets, as you mentioned. There's wildlife galore. We have all sorts of diverse ecosystems in South Africa. It's a world and a country, really. And we should both be protecting that, but also leveraging that. We're a developing country with our economy, which needs to be kickstarted again. It's been stagnant for some years, some decades now, really. And this is one of the ways that we can use what we have as a country in a sustainable way to create jobs, create employment, create that economic stimulus that we so
exactly.
massively need, but at the same time, making sure that we look after those assets that are going to drive that specific part of the economy.
100% agree with that, Andrew. So, and it's so important, I was saying before, to one of the biggest exports for South Africa. So preserving it into the future is really, really crucial to the economic growth and the prosperity of all South Africans. So yeah, moving on to our next question then for you, Andrew. As an Australian listener, the South African Parliament, as you may be aware, has had some funny moments over the years on the internet. So how has your experience been in Parliament over these last 3 to 4 months? And has there been anything you did not expect or were surprised about finding out?
Good question. It's maybe a bit difficult for me to answer because I've been in Parliament only since June this year. So we're now,
True.
in the end of September. So I've been in this for a few months. And some of your other guests may have mentioned, if you've had South Africans on before, that we don't actually have a parliament right now. So
Yes,
our
the
parliament burnt down in an unfortunate incident about 2.5 years ago, I think it was. So I can't actually tell you what it's like to sit in parliament, specifically that building anyway. So since then, we've had some makeshift arrangements where during COVID, of course, they had virtual parliamentary meetings. They then brought that back to hybrid parliamentary meetings because we don't have a venue that will seat all the 400 MPs and all the support staff and everything like that. So we've had very limited seatings with about 100 people at a time. The others logged in online. So it's been, quite a different experience, I think, to what some of my colleagues who've been there for multiple terms
exactly.
might be able to tell you about. But yeah, we've had some funny moments. People, leaving their video or their microphone on when they're joining hybridly, and the speaker has to call them out or kick them off the Zoom platform. So, people not paying attention. That always gets a bit of a laugh. And yeah, I had a memorable experience at least. We had a Heritage Day that we celebrated this month in South Africa on the 24th. We have a public holiday, and Parliament held a debate or a chance for parties to make speeches on the theme of heritage in South Africa. And I was speaking about our very diverse history as South Africans. Diversity really is at the core of everything
It
that South
really is.
Africa is about. And I mentioned the name of someone called Jan van Riebeeck, who was the Dutch colonial master who came to South Africa and established the settlement at the Cape that started the Dutch colonial time or the Dutch colonial era in South Africa, and for, which they have a lot to answer for in terms of our very turbulent history with, racist institutions and legislation, and the suffering of generations of people. And I, of course, understand that's a sensitive topic for many, but my point in my speech was around we've all inherited that legacy, along with all the other positives and negatives that all just make us South African and have landed us where we are today. And Julius Malema, who's the leader of the economic freedom fighters in South Africa, he's a populist character. He's all over the media all the time for saying outrageous things and misbehaving and wearing Gucci shoes to Parliament. And there's a whole scandal around
With his nice red beret and I
yeah.
love how they're all in sync. They just all wear red. It's quite funny to watch.
That is funny on its own, is seeing the red uniforms that they come up with. But he stepped in and said you can't mention this man, and we had a bit of a back and forth with which was quite surreal for me as someone who hadn't really considered a career in politics a year and a half ago, to now be sparring with one of the best known characters in politics in South
Mm.
Africa, and having a little bit of tete-a-tete with Julius Malema was something I found pretty memorable.
And you can probably say that to the grandkids that you had a little in your first couple of months. You had a little chat with Judge Julius Malema, because as you said, he is quite a famous character within South African politics and probably even world politics. There's a lot of people here in Australia who even know about him and know about his party's policies. And I'm up to my next question for you, Andrew. So this is probably one of our more it's probably one of our more entertaining questions and quite an interesting question to ask. So, seeing as you don't really have a very political background, I'm quite interested to see what you're going to say with this. But who would you say is your political role model or idol?
Oh, that's a really good question. I'd have to think about it. I mean, I've picked up some really great mentors along my way in the last few months, which has been really great. And I must say the DA's political caucus in Parliament is incredibly welcoming and friendly and helpful, especially for all of us newbies. They're
Mm.
quite understanding and tolerant of us making mistakes and slip-ups,
Maybe
which
ask you
we're bound to do.
some silly questions sometimes, or some pretty straightforward questions. Then I guess they're being quite informative and quite helpful.
Yeah, exactly. It's not so much a tough love approach. They're trying to help us. Which, if we do well, the team does well. That's the approach that we've taken as the DA. In terms of, I mean, political role models and idols, so, political idols, I think every South African, well, most South Africans idolize the guy who's called the father of our nation, Nelson Mandela. No matter which background or party or politics you come from, he managed to unite an incredibly diverse people for the first time and get us all pulling in the same direction without bloodshed, without civil war, which is something that South Africa can say, and not many African states can say the same. So, we have to really give him recognition for that. And on top of that, he was just someone who had an incredible way with people and led with love. And everyone felt that in South Africa. So that is something incredible. And there's lots of really good things to emulate from Madiba, from Nelson Mandela. In terms of the modern day politicians, I think the current mayor of Cape Town, Jordan Hill Lewis, is someone I definitely look up to. He again has an incredible way with people. His constituents in Cape Town absolutely love him across cultural divides, across income divides. He just is universally loved, and he's on the ground every single day, interacting with people, getting stuck into actual issues. If there's a major storm, he is there helping people pick up their possessions. He is, when a sewage spill leaks, he is there with a, bucket and a mop, like literally cleaning up the shit off the floor, if you'll excuse my language. He's an incredible person and a wonderful example of what a politician should be, not this, divisive politics at all costs, party before state, all these things which we've seen from plenty of politicians in South Africa over the last 30 years and before that, of course. So yeah, he's certainly someone I look up to, and he's also someone I look up to because we've come through the same program. So the DA has what it calls the Young Leaders Program, and the idea is they take 20 South Africans under the age of 35 every year and put them through an intensive leadership development process and give you political mentors and teach you how to write media statements and give public speeches, and take you through the values and principles of the party and how those are applied over policy. And it's just an incredible development opportunity that really catapulted me into the position that I am now from outside of politics, being able to apply and become an MP. And Jordan is one of the poster boys for that program,
Mm.
just showing, where investing in your own people can pay off to such, in such wonderful ways, and produce such great leaders for South Africa.
And it's a really good program as we've been previously talking with Edward McRae Barth about it as well. So the Democratic Alliance is very much focused on trying to connect with young people, especially. So, having that sort of
Yeah.
program with under 30s is really, really good and imperative because as we've seen now in South African Parliament with post the 2024 election, quite a number of MPs are in your age bracket there, Andrew, between 20 to 35.
Mm,
So,
mm,
and it's quite stark compared to, say, Australia, where our youngest federal MP is 29. Um,
mm,
so, in a sense, it's really good to see that South Africa's been able to have a lot of different people from different sorts of, age demographics. There's still a lot of older people, in their 60s and 70s and 50s and 40s as well. So, and a lot of diversity too in terms of, ethnic makeup, race, religion, and that sort of thing, which, you don't really necessarily see in other countries. So it's a really good testimony and it's a really good testimony, as I said, there for, for how South Africa's been doing in their early democracy. Of course, there's still growing pains and issues at the start, seeing it's only 30 years old. But
mm.
being able to represent the country as best as possible with people from all across the political spectrum and way of life is so, so important. It's such, I guess, a good way to represent the entire people of South Africa.
Yeah, I think you've touched on important points there. And I think, diversity is something that the DA takes seriously and celebrates, but um, we take a slightly different approach to some other parties where we're still merit-based, but we are able to turn out a diverse set of representatives. So as you mentioned, over race, age, gender, uh, geographic area, culture, language. You need to have all those represented in national leadership. I mean, that's just that. I think that goes without saying. Maybe for some people it doesn't, but you should also shouldn't be just parachuting people into positions they're not equipped for or not ready for. So I think it's quite amazing that the DA does everything on purely a merit-based approach. The applications for members of parliament was an 11-stage process for the DA at least. Other parties just appoint people to positions. We meritocratically put people through written tests, essays, 2 rounds of interviews. You give speeches. You have to write op-eds and media statements, which get marked by an independent contractor or independent expert, and the cream of the crop rises to the top, and we've ended up with a diverse group of people, and that's not because we said we have to have 30% this race or
Exactly.
50% women or whatever. It's just arisen naturally because of the selection processes, which is a wonderful thing, and that's really what we're striving for broadly in South Africa, is a country and a community where it doesn't matter what background you come from, what you look like, what your biological makeup is. It's purely about who you are as a person, what you can
Exactly.
offer, and that I think that's to achieve both the meritocratic process and a diverse outcome is quite a thing, and it's only really the DA which has got that right in South Africa so far.
I agree with that. I agree with that, Andrew, because in a sense, you can't just pick people just because of who they are, and where they come from and, how they look like specifically, because, they may not be a good representative. So that whole system around, trialing, testing, your MPs and seeing who could be a good member of parliament is so crucial. And I guess in a sense, having that sort of diversity is important, but you also got to be, you got to be there to do the job. You can't just be representing, a certain group of people. You got to be representing the whole of your province as South African MPs have to do. So, um, instructively being able to, in a sense, um, work as an MP and do the hard yards is really really important. Not necessarily just be there for the show, but you actually got to be there, to actually deliver upon. You can't just be there just because you look a certain way and or you say the right things. You've got to actually be there to deliver upon the promises that the South African people have entrusted in you.
Yeah, yeah, and I wanted to say something else on age because obviously I'm younger than most at 32, although I'm not the youngest. There are a
Mm,
few under 30, which is quite
mm,
remarkable. And as you said, we have a whole age range, at least within the DA. And I think that's important because, young people need to be represented. We are, the future of the country, and we need to represent young people's interests, not just take them into account, but actually have young people in decision-making positions, of course. But at the same time, you don't want to cut out all that institutional knowledge and experience that comes with older representatives who have an incredible understanding and grasp and range of skills and experience to lend to South Africa in terms of their service. So it's important you get that balance right, and also putting people on the right portfolios. So, before our last elections, our minister of it's called Youth, Women, and People with Disabilities. So they meant to represent young people's interests in that portfolio. That minister was 75 years old. So how does a 75-year-old represent the youth? It just doesn't make sense. And what the DA has done is brought a whole swathe of new ministers in our 6 ministers and 6 deputy ministers that we've been assigned, and we've put people in the right portfolios. So, our Minister of Digital Technology and Communications, which is, a progressive new technology type of environment, is I think our minister is 34 years old, which is old enough to have experience to run a huge, multi-billion rand department, but also young enough to understand the importance, the evolution of these technologies, what young people
exactly.
need and want. So, like I say, getting those kind of balances is crucially important.
It really, really is. And you can't just have, a young person representing youth, just being an 18, 19-year-old just because they're young. They got to have, that sort of experience. They got to have some sort of some traits and some skills they can bring into the role, as we were previously stating. So I totally agree with you there, Andrew. So moving on then to our next question. Um, what made you run in the 2024 federal election, Andrew, for the DA? And what made you join the Democratic Alliance?
So the second question is an easy one to answer. It's just that the DA represents the values that I think are important, and no one else does. I grew up in Cape Town, which has been a DA municipality for quite a while now. It was the first major municipality that the DA won in South Africa, and like I mentioned earlier, has been a real stronghold for the party ever since because of the good work that the party does. Cape Town and the Western Cape are the best managed municipalities and provinces in the country. Well, actually, I'm mistaken. Cape Town's been overtaken by Midvaal here in Gauteng, which is also DA run. So I was able to live in DA run areas and see how it's different to the rest of the country where things were falling apart because people were putting their party ahead of the people and misspending funds and with having inappropriate people in positions. And there's a whole list I could go on, but the DA stood for equality, even when things like going against affirmative action was unpopular. People said that we were against the national project, but it states that we are a non-racial society in our constitution, and that sort of swung around now with the GNU and proved that the DA was right all along. And being steadfast to those values and principles really impressed me and made me I've always supported the DA in my private capacity for those reasons. So it was easy to make that decision. And then in terms about why I ran, so I was on the Young Leaders program last year in 2023, and it was about May 2023 when the applications opened for people to become DA and members of Parliament. And a few of my fellow classmates or people on the program put their hands up, being in political positions already and being on that sort of track career-wise. And I was considering my career at that point. I'd been in a pretty similar space for 7 years and looking for what might be the next opportunity for me, and thought this might be something I could pursue. And even if I didn't get through this 11-stage selection process, at least I would learn something about myself and bank
Exactly.
some experience along the way. So as I said in the beginning, it's all about putting your hand up for the opportunities that
Mm,
come your way. This was something that happened to go right for me, and every funnel step I kept getting through, and
mhm.
it became a real possibility. And I weighed up my options and decided that, as daunting a prospect as it was, coming from a non-political background, to make the step up to MP is huge. Uh, if good people don't put their hands up for these kinds of positions, then who is going to take that position? What are they going to do with it? And if good people don't step up, then how do we move this country forward and
Exactly.
get it where it needs to be? So as a young person with skills and passion and something to give to the country, I decided to, follow through with it, and here I am. I don't regret it one bit.
And I guess another question that related to that is, did you always really have that sort of political destiny sort of with you? Like, did you always think maybe you'd become a politician when you were younger, or has that always just has that just come up just through circumstances and just seeing how South Africa's turned out in the last 20 years or so?
No, it was never an aspiration of mine, funnily enough. I hadn't ever considered it. I didn't even think it was a door that would open for me. But having been exposed to how governments work and, like I said, don't work sometimes through my professional career in the NGO space, I got very frustrated at times with how things didn't work and payments didn't go through and people didn't stick to their promises and things weren't delivered on. And there was just a whole litany of things to get frustrated about working with government and also just living in South Africa and living the failures of government. Which got to the point where when I had an opportunity to actually insert myself and do something about it, it was an easy decision to make at that point because I had been through those experiences, but it hadn't actually been on my career radar at all until I joined the Young Leaders program.
I see, I see, Andrew. And I guess joining the Young Leaders program has really set you up in life now. And you're an MP, which is quite a remarkable turnaround, seeing as you never thought you'd become a member of Parliament. So that's always a great thing to hear. So then moving on to our final question then for you, Andrew. Now it's been great talking to you and great hearing about your experiences. But for our younger viewers, sorry, what sort of advice would you give to them in 2024, 2025? Especially those who probably be starting university and high school in the next couple of months.
I'm going to sound like a stuck record, but really just t take the most of the opportunities that come your way and seek out opportunities. And one additional piece of advice I would give is don't underestimate the value of networking, because
Mm,
so often it's not actually about what you know or how good you are. It's about who you know and who's going to give you that little glimmer that you can follow,
mm,
and which doors they're going to open for you. And knowing good people and having the support of good people as well, having them in your corner, backing you when you need them most, that's super important. And I think politics can be quite a lonely journey. And I think at all times, we need support of people.
exactly.
So yeah, make sure that you have, strong foundations in that sense. And then university in particular is a wonderful space to move in. You have such diverse people, from your professors right down to your classmates, to engage with, learn from, debate with, grow your perspective, and keep challenging yourself. And then when those opportunities do come up, just, put your hand up, and maybe they say yes. You're going
Mm,
to have to face rejection in your life, but I wouldn't be where I am now unless I'd kept trying and been persistent in chasing things down. And you never know, you never know where things might lead. It might be a small volunteering position that you take up to, I don't know, volunteer for your student political organization at an event, but you get to meet someone who's in the career who becomes a mentor for you or something like
exactly.
that. You just absolutely never know where that next opportunity is coming. So yeah,
Mm,
just keep grabbing those opportunities with both hands.
exactly. 100% agree with you there, Andrew. And we've previously said as well, in other podcasts, taking every opportunity that's possible, no matter where it comes from, is crucial because you never know if that might be your best opportunity that you ever get given. So, yeah, always take those opportunities. And I guess, if you are political at a young age, try and get involved in political clubs at university or even join the party that you like. And, being involved in the young party movement is really, really crucial and especially in student politics, to further on your career. And maybe if you don't want to necessarily become a politician, but there's a lot of networks and great people who are in the corporate or business side of the world who are part of political parties. So those sort of opportunities sometimes are, not many people actually consider and join a political party. So, if those opportunities are offered a lot more, I guess a lot more people would be interested and really willing to, to volunteer and help out as best as they can.
Yeah. Just to add to that, someone like me, I think, is a good example of the fact that politicians are not one size fits all. You don't have to study politics. You don't have to be a policy wonk or something to get involved. We need all sorts of different skills from the highest level of government down to, the local government, and getting people with skills into the right positions where they can make an impact for the betterment of, society as a whole, the country as a whole. That's so important. So if you're interested in politics, but you end up, on a law degree, don't don't think that door is closed. We
Exactly.
need lawyers, we need accountants, we have doctors in Parliament. There's all sorts of opportunities within politics if that's what you're interested in, and a diverse skill set will actually stand you in really, really good stead.
Exactly. 100% agree with you there, Andrew. So those are all our questions for the interview. I do really appreciate you again, Andrew, coming on the podcast for over an hour and speaking to us, especially about your career before politics, um, you know, as a biologist and now part of Parliament, and some advice you give to students in 2024, 2025, especially those who are starting university and high school. So from the Donkey Fight podcast team and from all our viewers, we do appreciate you coming on the podcast and sparing some time for us.
Been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.